While playing around with Blender making background images for my website, it dawned on me that I could make a wallpaper that spanned my PC's triple screens. In this tutorial aimed at beginners, I'll take you through the entire process of making an automotive themed triple screen spanning wallpaper in both 4K and HD. Then I'll show you how to apply it across your 3 monitors. I have to assume that if you're watching this, you already have Blender installed, but we will need to download and install a couple of free add-ons if you want to follow along. You'll also need to download the zip file in the description to recreate the end result for yourself. But don't worry, it's all very simple. Let's start with the Poliigon add-on, which will provide us with a bunch of free high quality materials for Blender and also makes it super simple to apply them. Click the Poliigon link in the description, which will bring you to this page, and download the add-on. You'll need to create a free account with Poliigon, the only catch being that you'll receive an email maybe once a month, which is a pretty good deal in my book. Remember your login info because you'll need to enter it into the Blender add-on later. Now click the Sketchfab link in the description and scroll down to this button, which will send you to a GitHub page where you can download the latest add-on version as a zip file. Sketchfab has heaps of free high quality 3D models, of which we'll use some cars for our wallpaper. You'll also need to create a free account with Sketchfab. While we're going, let's download the asset pack I've included for this tutorial from the link in the description. So let's open Blender now and we'll choose a general workspace and we'll install the add-ons. Go up here to Edit and choose Preferences. In the Addons tab, we'll go to Install and find where you save the Poliigon zip and hit Install. Make sure the add-on is activated and do the same with the Sketchfab add-on. We'll need to enter our login info later when we go to use the add-ons. And you're done. Alright, so let's set up our workspace. We'll delete the default cube and press Shift A to add a mesh in the form of a plane. This plane will become our brick wall. Press R to rotate and X to rotate around the X axis, and then 90 and enter to make it vertical. Then we'll press G to grab it and Z to move it upwards, and 1 for 1 meter. To make our life easier, we'll right click on the plane and set the origin to 3D cursor. Now we'll press N to open this toolbox and change the X dimension to 24 and the Y to 3. Then we'll press Ctrl A to apply and apply the scale. With the plane still selected, press Tab to enter edit mode and press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, which will make a yellow line appear. And before you click anything else, scroll your mouse wheel until you have 7 vertical lines. Then double click. The 7 cuts will give us 8 equal faces, which will be perfectly square, which will help us later when we go to add material to the wall. Now let's press Tab to go back to object mode and we'll add a ground plane. Press Shift A to add a new mesh and choose plane. We'll grab it and move it in the Y direction, -1 meter. Right click on it and set the origin to 3D cursor. Then we'll change both the X and Y dimensions to 24 meters. And now for the fun part. We'll add some sweet cars from Sketchfab. Up here in this toolbox, you may have noticed there's now a Sketchfab tab since we activated the add-ons earlier. Let's check that out and press Activate Add-on. And it will ask you for your login details from when you made your account earlier. Slap them in there and you're good to go. I'm going for a Nissan or Datsun 240Z theme here, so let's search for free 240Z. Click this thumb to open the page of results, and first off I'll install this grey Rocket Bunny car. Click on import model and wait for a little bit. You may have noticed that it's frickin' huge. We'll scale it down to match our scene by pressing S and then 0.01 to make it fit. That's better. Press number pad 7 to enter the top view and grab it and shift it over around here somewhere. Now press numpad 1 to see the front view, and we'll move it upwards so the tyres are sitting just on the ground plane. We'll add another car now, so let's open up the page of results again and choose the blue 240Z and import model. This one is smaller in scale than the first one, so to fix that we'll press number pad 7 to go back to the top view and rotate the new car 90 degrees to match the first. We'll move it over on top of that one. Now we'll scale and move it to check the size against the other car until they're about the same size. Once you're done, rotate the new car 180 degrees and move it to the other side of the ground plane like so. Switch to the front view and sit that car down on the ground. And the cars are done. Big thanks to Danik98 for the Rocket Bunny 240Z and to Lexi C16 for the Blue Z. See more of their work on Sketchfab. Before we set up our camera, we'll go to the render properties and change the render engine to cycles and the device to GPU compute. If you already had your render settings in cycles, importing the cars will reset it to Eevee, so you'll need to fix that now. Then we'll go to the world properties and change the background color to pure black. Lastly, we'll press numpad 0 to see what our camera sees and quickly realize we need to move it. Let's switch back to the top view and grab the camera and move it somewhere near the center of the ground plane and rotate it so it's facing our wall. Press numpad 3 to enter the right side view and move the camera down near the ground and rotate it upwards like so. I think now is about time to split our viewport and fine tune our camera view while we can see what it sees. If we drag the divider above the timeline, we can make it bigger, and we'll press numpad 0 to go into the camera view on the top viewport, and from this drop down in the lower screen we'll choose 3D viewport and switch to the side view so we can see where our camera is. We'll change the size of the camera now to match our triple screen size. If we open our output properties tab, we'll see our current camera res at the top. Click the X resolution slider and click it again to be able to type. If we press asterisk and then 3, it will multiply the width by 3 and give us what we need for our triple screens. We'll work in triple HD now just to keep our render times down while we're testing stuff out, and we'll switch to triple 4K once we're done building our scene. Now we can go back and adjust the camera so the cars are in view, and we'll try to keep the wall within frame as well. We can reset the camera's Y and Z rotations to 0 to get it square to the wall, and we can adjust the car positions as we like to get something that looks good. Remember to select the cars from the outliner or you'll end up dragging pieces of the car away when you don't want to. Incidentally, if we select our camera and go into the object data properties, under viewport display and composition guides, we can check the box marked thirds, and it will give us a grid to visualize what will be on each of our 3 monitors. The grid may come in handy to fine tune our wallpaper as we go. Press N to turn this toolbox on the right on and off, and we'll be able to see what we're doing a bit better. We can click through these buttons on each viewport to switch between rendered, material, solid and wireframe views. The cars look good in material view and it allows us to see what we're doing, so we'll stick to that view for now. Now we'll add the light up sign we saw in the intro. Make sure you've downloaded and extracted the zip file I've linked in the description, and we'll go to File, Import, and select wavefront.obj. Find the object file and click Import. We'll need to change the X rotation to 0 and the scale by 0.01 to get it into shape. If we switch to our front view with number pad 1, we can grab the sign and move it up to about here, where I imagine it would sit if we could split our center screen into thirds. About a third of the way in from the left and from the top. In the top view, we'll move it along the y-axis so it's sitting just off the wall. To go with the sign, I thought a metal ring around it might look a bit more interesting. For that, we'll press Shift A to add a new mesh, and we'll go with the torus. You'll see this menu appear in the bottom left, and we'll change two things in it. Make your major radius 1 meter and the minor radius 0.03 meters. Now let's rotate it 90 degrees in the x-axis, and then go into your front view and move it so it's surrounding the shop sign. Then we'll scale it down so it's just bigger than the sign. Now right click on it and select Shade Smooth. Oh, and we'll need to move it slightly off the wall like we did with the sign. Alright, so we have a wall here. Let's make it look like one. In this toolbox here, where we found our cars before, you'll see another tab now called Poliigon. Let's click it and remember our login details we made when we downloaded the add-on, and enter them here. In the search box, type in free bricks, and you'll be shown these cool red guys with some nice highlights on them. The Blender Guru said we could use these for free, so let's do it. Click on Purchase, which I did earlier, and it will download the 2K version of the material, which is exactly what we need for our wall. Once it's done, click Apply 2K, and we can see it looks awful. But don't worry, we just need to UV unwrap our wall and adjust the size. Press Tab to enter edit mode, and A to select all. Then press U to UV unwrap, and then click unwrap, which makes things worse. We're not done yet though. Click up here on the UV editing tab, and you'll see we have some new things to play with. In the left screen, you'll see our brick texture and a mesh pattern that corresponds to the mesh on our wall plane. We can get our wall in view on the right of screen, and we'll be able to see how our manipulations look. First, we want to press A to select all of the mesh and rotate it by 90 degrees to fix our orientation. Now if we press S to scale and make the grid about the same height as the texture, it works out to be pretty spot on for our scale. Trust me, I did the maths. If we go back to our layout and look at our camera view, I think that looks pretty good as far as scale goes. Now let's add a material to our ground plane. The plane won't be seen much in the wallpaper, but it will create some reflections, so it helps to give it a realistic appearance. Back in our Poliigon menu, let's search for free asphalt. There should be only one result, which we'll purchase, and when it's done, hit Apply 2K. We'll do the same trick with the UV unwrapping and scale up the mesh. With the ground plane selected, press Tab to enter edit mode and A to select all. We'll subdivide our plane to help us scale the texture by right clicking on it and choose Subdivide. In the Subdivide menu, we'll choose the number of cuts to be 6, but really it should be 7. It doesn't matter. Switch over to the UV editing tab and select your mesh by pressing A in the left viewport and scale it up till it looks about right. You don't have to be too precise here. If we go back to our layout, we'll fix the material on the frame of our speed shop sign. If we select it in the outliner and drop down the sub-menus, we can see that it has two materials already applied, but they both just look white. We can fix them though. With the powder coat black selected, we can go down here to the material properties and change a couple of values to get it looking the way it was intended. Obviously we'll change our base color to black, then we can change the roughness to about 0.2 for a satin finish. We'll also add a new texture to the ring, so we'll select it and in the materials properties we'll add a new material. Then crank the metallic up to 1 and make the roughness 0.05. For the last of our non-emissive materials, we'll add the opening hours decal onto the wall. For this one, we'll select our wall and go into the shading tab, which will show us this node setup and a few other windows. Let's make a bit of room and get our wall in view. Then select these two nodes and move them to make space to add a couple of new ones. Now hit Shift A to add a new node and go to Texture and Image Texture. Then we'll add another node in Color and Mix Color. Connect the base color from the Poliigon node setup to the B input of your mix node and the color output of your texture to the A input. Connect the result to the input of the principled BSDF node. In your texture node, click the folder to open the PNG image included in the zip file you downloaded earlier. You'll see that it's repeating across the wall, which we don't want. So in the third drop down, change it from repeat to clip. Now let's resize and reposition it. To do that, we'll go over here to the Object Data Properties and under UV Maps, click the plus to add another map and rename it to Opening Hours. In our node editor, let's add another input node called UV Map and connect it to the Image Texture node. In the UV Map drop-down, select the Opening Hours UV Map. In our scene viewport, we'll need to select our wall and press Tab to enter edit mode. Make sure this viewport is the UV editor and the subject is the opening hours PNG, and then scroll your mouse wheel to go across to confirm that you're editing the opening hours UV map. Press A to select all of the mesh. We can scale it up and move it until we can see in the upper viewport that the writing is the size and in the position we want. We can scale the x-axis if it's too tall. And that's about all we need to do for our textures, so we'll press Tab to go back to object mode and switch back to our layout workspace. Back in our layout workspace with our speed shop sign selected, we'll change the white lettering so that it's illuminated. That's pretty easy to do. From the outliner, choose the ABS white material and open the material properties tab. If we open the surface menu, we can change it to emission, and instead of going with a color, if we click the yellow dot beside the color settings, we can change it to black body from the converter menu. This will allow us to set the color temperature. I like 4000 Kelvin for that, which is on the lower side and just getting into the warmer range. I think a strength of 5 looks about right. And that's about it for the lettering. Now we'll add a couple more planes which will become the colored lights we can see in the intro. Press Shift A to add a new mesh of the plane variety. We'll scale it by 0.25 to make it smaller, and we can move it up by 0.005 in the Z direction. Next we'll add a material by going into the material properties and pressing new, and we'll change the surface type to emission. Let's change the color to red and the strength to, let's say, 5. Then we can move it over here and keep it reasonably close to the wall. Alright, now with our red plane selected, we'll press Shift D to duplicate it and move it up to the top left above the shop sign, just out of the camera frame. We'll remove the red light material by pressing the minus button, and add a new material, which will change to emission and change the color to blue and the strength to 5. I think we can delete the original light that Blender gave us to see the effect of the colored lights. Isn't that nifty? Now I'll add some spotlights to give the cars that slight bit of detail to let people know that they're there. In the front view, press Shift A and add a light and choose Spot. Grab it and drag it up above the grey car until the bottom of the cone is just touching the ground. Switch to the top view and drag it along the Y axis until the cone is just clear of the wall. We can crank up the power. Around 200 watts seems to work, and we can leave the other settings alone. Still on our top view, we can press Shift D to duplicate the light and drag it along the X axis so that the cone shines onto the blue car. Compositing is what will give us that extra bit of flash to make our wallpaper just that little bit more interesting. So let's do that by going up here to the Compositing tab. If you haven't run off a render yet, press F12 now to make one, and wait. Let's go into this menu on the top left of our dope sheet and change it to Image Editor. From this drop down, change the subject to be the render result. Now we'll be able to see our compositing changes in real time. Let's activate the Use Nodes checkbox, and I like to press N to get rid of this toolbox. Click anywhere on the node screen to deselect the two nodes and make a bit of space between them. First up, we'll press Shift A to add a new node, then from the filter menu choose Glare. Then we can just drop it on the connection between the two existing nodes. From the top drop down, we can change it from streaks to fog glow. Then let's change the size of the glare down to 7. Next we'll add a lens distortion node from the distort menu and drop it straight on the connection. This one simulates camera properties, which will give us a subtle bit of realism. Distort representing barrel distortion that all camera lenses have, and the dispersion will give us chromatic aberration, which is the light refraction you see when light passes through a prism and splits into the colours of the rainbow, and some lenses tend to do that. We only need the slightest amount of both, so we'll go with 0.005 for our distort value and also 0.005 for the dispersion. I do love the colour that this blue Z comes with, but I'd like to make it tie in a bit better with the blue light we've added. If we select the body of the car from the viewport and go to Material Properties, we can change the base colour here. Select the colour and change it to something else. I like a midnight blue, which we can do like so. Changing the colour of the grey car is a bit more difficult since the body is in several parts, which all have a separate material, but it looks fine as is anyway. I think the blue light looks a little weaker than the red, so we'll make it a bit brighter to try and even it out a bit. I think a strength of 10 looks about right. I think we'll use the colour temperature trick again with these spotlights to give a bit more life to the scene. If we select one, then go over here to our object data properties, we can add the black body node by clicking Use Nodes, then the yellow dot and choose black body. The same 4000 Kelvin we have from the shop sign will match in nicely. Then repeat for the other spotlight. The eagle-eyed viewer may have also spotted this orange light on the Rocket Bunny car. I'd like to get rid of that, so we'll zoom in on the front of the car and click on the indicator light, and in our material properties we can drag this emission strength slider down to 0. This metal ring looks a bit blocky, so we'll select it and go into the modifier menu and add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth it out. The viewport looks good with a value of 2, and we'll give it 3 for our render. I think we can move the red light plane so that it lights up the sign a bit better. like so. For that final touch of ambience, we're going to add volumetrics to our scene, which will give us that midnight fog that always looks good in a nightscape. To do that, we'll add a cube and move and scale it so that our camera, wall and cars are inside it. Now with our cube still selected, we'll switch to the shading workspace. We'll get rid of these two windows on the left by clicking in the corner here when the cursor turns into a cross and dragging across like so, just to make some room. Now switch the top view to rendered mode. If we go down here to our material properties, we'll add a new material and we'll see that our nodes will appear. We want to delete the principled BSDF and replace it with a principled volume node from the shader submenu. Connect the output to the volume input on your material output node and you'll see that everything has gone dark. That's because the density is way too high, so we can reduce it to about 0.05 to get our scene back. We can add some random wispiness to the fog by adding a few more nodes, starting with the good old noise texture. Press Shift A to add it from the texture submenu and plug the factor output into the density input. You'll notice that the scene has gone dark again. To fix that, this time we'll add a color ramp node from the converter submenu and drop it on the link in front of the noise texture. Drag the black handle over to about halfway and you should have some patchy fog clouds. To add that wispiness we spoke of, just increase the detail on your noise texture to maximum. I liked the result of a roughness value of 0.8 and an anisotropy value of 0.65. If you want to make the fog less prominent, change the white color in the color ramp to more of a grey. We can run off some quick renders to check if everything looks the way we want it. And to compare the renders, choose a different slot in the render window for subsequent renders and switch back between them to compare them. Once you're satisfied, we'll go back to our layout workspace and into the render properties to tweak a few settings before we make our final 4K render. I like to increase the max samples to about 16,000 while having a noise threshold of 0.02. Some say having some noise adds to the photorealism, but I'll let you decide for yourself. In the output properties, we can adjust our resolution to triple 4K by just multiplying both the X and Y values by 2. Choose an output folder for your wallpaper and a file format you like. PNG or JPEG will both work. I like JPEG with 97% quality since the output file was around 3 meg compared to a PNG that was 20 meg and there was no noticeable drop in quality. Now hit F12 again and run off your final render. Mine took about 3.5 minutes, but this will obviously depend on your machine. On your desktop, right click the background and go to Personalize. Click the background tab and in Personalize your background, click on the drop down. Select picture and then browse photos and locate your render and click choose photo. Choose a fit from the drop down and make it span. If you've done multiple different renders, you can even make it a slideshow between them all. Since you have a scene set up now, you can make all the backgrounds you want. Move the cars around, move the camera, add some extra lights, get crazy with it. If you'd like to make puddles on the ground like you see here, I've linked a Blender Guru tutorial in the description that will show you how to do that. Animations are not impossible either, and if you'd like to make an animation and don't know how, check out my previous video on Blender animation for beginners. It's not all that difficult, and it's really gratifying to get a result that you're happy with. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching, and if you followed along with the tutorial, please let me see how it turned out. It'd be great to know that I've helped someone on their Blender journey, and I get a kick out of seeing your work. Until next time.